The world-famous bust of Nefertiti, Queen of Egypt, first went on display in the German capital 100 years ago.
When researchers wheeled the 3,300-year-old Nefertiti bust into a high-powered digital scanning bay, they expected a solid block of stone. Instead, high-energy beams pierced the outer plaster and rendered a hidden reality on the monitors. A second, completely distinct face was staring back from inside the artifact. It had deep wrinkles, uneven cheekbones, and a prominent bump on the nose. The world's ultimate icon of perfection was a lie, sending an immediate shockwave through orthodox Egyptology. What exactly did the radiation beam collide with inside the stone? The inciting incident, the scan that shocked the experts. The Nefertiti bust is the ultimate global symbol of flawless human beauty. Encased in protective glass at the Neues Museum in Berlin, her razor-sharp jawline, perfectly symmetrical cheekbones, and swan-like neck have captivated millions. To the naked eye, she is a pristine monument to ancient perfection, untouched by the ravages of time or human frailty. But human eyes can only see what the outer surface allows. When a team of researchers pushed the absolute limits of non-destructive archaeological science, they wheeled this 3,300-year-old limestone and stucco masterpiece into a high-powered, multi-slice digital scanning bay. The objective was purely technical: map the internal density of the artifact, check for structural microfractures, and preserve a digital blueprint of Egypt's most famous queen for future generations. What happened next, however, shattered the calm of the laboratory and sent an immediate icy shockwave through the ranks of orthodox Egyptology. As the high-energy radiation beams pierced the outer layers of painted plaster, the digital monitors did not just display a solid block of uniform stone. Instead, the computer screens began rendering a hidden, deeply unsettling reality. A second, completely distinct face was staring back at the researchers from inside the artifact. This was not a duplicate of the iconic queen. It was a radically different woman altogether. The smooth, idealized skin was gone, replaced by deep, realistic wrinkles carved around the corners of the mouth. The perfectly straight, regal nose was missing, substituted by a distinct, uneven bump on the nasal bridge. The fierce, symmetrical cheekbones were noticeably softer and sunken, showing clear signs of natural human aging. The team realized they were looking at a hidden anatomical profile that completely contradicted the public face of the Amarna heresy. It was a moment of profound professional panic for the experts in the room. If the most famous face from the ancient world was fundamentally an engineered illusion, then everything academia had written about the art, the politics, and the divine status of Queen Nefertiti had to be completely called into question. The initial shock turned into an urgent forensic investigation as the team tried to comprehend why an ancient master craftsman had gone to such extreme lengths to hide the queen's true visage behind a mask of plaster. What exactly did the radiation beam collide with inside the stone? Decoupling the core, the advanced science of the subsurface imaging. One must look at the physics of the scanning bay itself to comprehend how a hidden face could remain undetected within a solid block of ancient stone for over 3 millennia. The breakthrough did not rely on standard photography, which is fundamentally limited by the way photons bounce off the outermost layer of pigment. Instead, the investigative team utilized an advanced, multi-slice computed tomography setup, essentially a high-powered, industrial-grade evolution of medical imaging. The machine functions by projecting a tightly focused, fan-shaped beam of high-energy X-rays through the artifact from a multitude of angles as the scanning gantry rotates smoothly around the protective casing. On the opposite side of the emitter, an array of highly sensitive, solid-state digital detectors measures the exact amount of radiation that successfully manages to pass through the sculpture. This process relies entirely on a physical principle known as radiation attenuation. As X-rays travel through any physical matter, they collide with atoms, causing the beam to lose energy and intensity. The rate of this energy loss is directly tied to the density and atomic number of the material the beam is trying to penetrate. A highly dense, compact material, like natural limestone, will absorb or scatter significantly more X-rays than a lighter, more porous substance like ancient gypsum plaster or organic stucco. As the scanner completes its rotations, it captures thousands of individual, one-dimensional radiological profiles from every conceivable trajectory. Advanced mathematical algorithms, specifically filtered back projection, take this massive mountain of raw data and reconstruct it into an intricate series of two-dimensional cross-sectional slices. Each slice represents a microscopic, horizontal window into the interior of the bust, completely mapping the exact internal geography of the object, without requiring the team to flake off a single grain of 3,300-year-old paint. When these individual digital slices are stacked sequentially on top of one another in a dedicated rendering computer, they form a highly accurate, three-dimensional volumetric model of the entire artifact. The resulting digital model allowed scientists to systematically isolate and peel back the specific density thresholds of the sculpture. By tuning the software to filter out the lighter density signature of the outer stucco, the researchers effectively stripped away the superficial layers of plaster on their monitors. The computer screen did not show a blurry, amorphous block of stone. It rendered a stark, high-contrast, three-dimensional skeletal view of a highly detailed limestone core hidden beneath. The digital reconstruction clearly delineated the physical boundary where the natural stone core ended and the synthetic plaster buildup began. The interface between these two distinct materials was shockingly distinct, revealing that the ancient sculptor had applied varying thicknesses of stucco across different zones of the face to actively manipulate the final appearance. In some regions, like the tip of the chin, the plaster layer was mere millimeters thick, serving only as a smooth substrate for the final application of colorful pigments. In other areas, such as the bridge of the nose and the surrounding cheek structures, the stucco was built up heavily, creating an entirely artificial structural topography that completely masked the underlying natural contours of the limestone base. The data was undeniable. The machine had decoupled the core from its mask, providing irrefutable physical proof that the bust was a complex, multi-layered construction engineered to present a highly specific visual narrative. The scientific team sat in absolute silence as they realized the computer model had just exposed a deliberate, meticulously executed act of ancient state-sponsored aesthetic modification. The resulting data did not just show a different material, it exposed a different woman. The face under the face, dissecting the alterations. The digital removal of the outer stucco layer exposed an anatomical reality that shook the research team to its core. For thousands of years, the world had admired Nefertiti through the lens of a highly stylized, flawless visage. The multi-slice scans, however, laid bare a raw, unflinching portrait of a real human being, meticulously carved into the underlying limestone by a master hand. This inner face was not a rough, unfinished sketch meant to be hidden away under plaster. It was a highly finished, incredibly detailed sculpture in its own right, possessing its own distinct personality and physical traits. By comparing the limestone core directly with the final outer plaster shell, the forensic team was able to isolate the exact systematic alterations made by the royal artisan. The first and most jarring divergence appeared on the bridge of the nose. The outer face of the bust features a straight, perfectly sloped nose that has long been cited as the golden standard of ancient symmetry. The limestone core, however, told a completely different story. The raw stone sculpture possessed a distinct pronounced bump right along the nasal bridge, coupled with a slight indentation just above the tip. The tip of the stone nose itself was also significantly less refined, showing a broader, more rounded structure than the sharp, elegant silhouette visible on the surface. The thick applications of plaster had been used like a modern surgical filler, leveling out the natural ridge of the bone and building up the surrounding areas to forge a completely idealized, straight profile. As the researchers shifted their focus to the mid-face region, the anatomical discrepancies became even more profound. The outer plaster surface is famous for its razor-sharp, elevated cheekbones that create a look of perpetual youth and commanding authority. Beneath that smooth facade, the limestone core revealed that Nefertiti's true cheekbones were much lower, softer, and far less prominent. Furthermore, the stone face exhibited noticeable structural asymmetry. The left cheekbone was carved slightly differently than the right, a natural human variation that the artist completely erased on the surface. The sculptor had deliberately padded the cheeks with thick layers of stucco, leveling the asymmetry and artificially lifting the contours to create a hypersymmetrical, youthful appearance. Perhaps the most humanizing, yet politically dangerous discoveries were found around the mouth and eyes. The pristine outer layer depicts a woman with smooth, flawless skin, entirely unblemished by the passage of time. When the computer isolated the limestone core, it revealed deep-set, realistic wrinkles and creases carved into the stone at the corners of the mouth and branching outward from the eyes. These were clear, undeniable physiological markers of an aging woman, a queen who had lived through the stress of childbirth, royal court politics, and the relentless Egyptian sun. The stone core also showed a slight sagging along the jawline, indicating a softening of the facial tissues that naturally comes with maturity. The realization was staggering. Every single sign of aging and natural physical irregularity had been systematically targeted and erased. The ancient artist had used the plaster as an architectural tool to smooth over the deep creases, fill in the sagging tissues along the jaw, and sharpen the contours of the chin. The inner limestone statue represented the real Nefertiti, a mature woman with a bumped nose, aging skin, and asymmetrical features, while the outer plaster layer represented an artificial, ageless entity. This was not a standard portrait. It was a multi-layered piece of optical engineering designed to permanently bury the queen's mortality beneath an unyielding shell of perfection. This was not an artistic mistake, it was a calculated political mandate. The Amarna crisis, why the truth was dangerous. The aging face of Queen Nefertiti beneath a flawless plaster mask. One must step directly into the political fires of the mid-14th century BCE to understand why a royal sculptor would expend such immense labor to bury the truth. This was the Amarna period, an era of unprecedented radicalism that brought the Nile Valley to the absolute brink of total civil war. Nefertiti's husband, Amenhotep IV, had committed the ultimate sacrilege. He single-handedly abolished Egypt's thousands of years old pantheon of gods, closed the ancient temples, and stripped the incredibly powerful priesthood of Amun of their immense wealth and political influence. He changed his name to Akhenaten and declared that there was only one true god, the Aten, represented visually as the blazing disk of the sun. This was not a peaceful spiritual awakening, it was a brutal, state-sponsored ideological purge The royal family abandoned the historical capital of Thebes, marching deep into the harsh, unmapped desert to build a brand new capital city from scratch, named Akhetaten, or the Horizon of the Aten. In this isolated, highly charged pressure cooker of a city, the traditional rules of Egyptian society were utterly shattered. Religion, geopolitics, and military strategy were completely upended. Because the old gods were gone, the entire spiritual stability of the empire now rested solely on the shoulders of the royal couple. Akhenaten and Nefertiti were no longer just earthly rulers. They were the exclusive, divine intermediaries between humanity and the solar disk. If the Aten was the eternal, unchanging sun, then the royal family, its living manifestations on Earth, had to project that same immutable, eternal stability to the terrified populace. This is where the physical reality of an aging queen became a catastrophic liability to the state. The empire was fracturing. The Hittite Empire was aggressively encroaching on Egypt's northern borders. The traditional priesthood was secretly plotting a counter-revolution from the shadows, and the common people were deeply traumatized by the sudden destruction of their traditional faith. In the midst of this compounding geopolitical chaos, the public could not be allowed to see a queen who was showing physical vulnerability. They could not see deep-set wrinkles, sagging jawlines, uneven cheekbones, or a bumped nose. Signs of human aging were signs of human mortality, and mortality meant weakness. If Nefertiti could age, she could die. If she could die, then the divine solar theology of the Amarna regime was fundamentally flawed. The master sculptor Thutmos understood the high-stakes political assignment perfectly. The limestone core captured the raw, factual, and aging flesh of the queen, but the state required an immortal icon. The thick layers of stucco applied over the stone core were not just decorative additions, they were tools of political survival. By smoothing away the wrinkles and artificially sharpening her features, Thutmos engineered an unchanging, ageless propaganda weapon that broadcasted absolute power, flawless divine mandate, and perfect symmetry to a collapsing world. But a masterpiece of this political importance could not stay buried forever. The workshop of Thutmos, excavating a state secret. The engineered illusion of Nefertiti's ageless majesty remained perfectly preserved in the desert sands for over 3,000 years, hidden within the ruins of her abandoned capital. The silence was finally broken on December 6, 1912, during an excavation led by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, working on behalf of the German Oriental Society. Borchardt's team was methodically clearing an unpretentious mud brick complex in the southern sector of the ruined city of Amarna. They knew the structure had belonged to an elite artisan, as ancient ivory writing palettes found on site bore the name and title of Thutmos, the chief of works and master sculptor to the king. The site was not a public temple or a royal tomb. It was a private, active artistic laboratory that had been abruptly abandoned when the Amarna regime collapsed after the death of Akhenaten. As the excavators cleared away centuries of packed debris from a collapsed room labeled House P47.2, they noticed a flash of vibrant color protruding from the dirt. Digging carefully with hand tools, they unearthed the lifelike, painted bust of the queen, resting upside down in a layer of soft sand and broken mud bricks. The protective sand had cushioned its fall when the roof caved in, preserving its delicate plaster coating and vivid pigments with near miraculous fidelity. Borchardt wrote in his field diary that words were completely inadequate to describe the breathtaking artistry of the object. He immediately recognized that this artifact broke every established convention of traditional Egyptian art, which usually favored rigid, highly stylized profiles. The bust possessed an eerie, organic vitality that seemed almost Western in its execution, displaying a profound understanding of underlying facial anatomy. What early 20th century experts did not realize, however, was that they were looking at a highly curated studio model. The bust was never meant to be placed in a tomb or displayed in a public temple. It lacked the traditional back pillar or base attachment required for formal religious statues. Instead, Thutmos's workshop function was that of a master template repository. The bust was a high-fidelity reference model used to cast secondary replicas and guide the production of relief carvings and statues across the empire. It had to be pristine because it served as the absolute blueprint for the Queen's state-sanctioned identity. The initial documentation of the find was shrouded in immediate controversy. Recognizing the unparalleled artistic and historical value of the piece, Borchardt was determined to secure it for the Berlin museums. Under the Division of Finds laws of the era, the Egyptian Antiquities Service inspected all excavated items before they could be legally exported. Critics have long alleged that Borchardt deliberately obscured the true nature of the bust, wrapping it carefully, placing it in a poorly lit crate, and misrepresenting it on the official registry as a minor, low-quality plaster statue of an unnamed royal woman to bypass the oversight of the French Inspector General Gaston Maspero. The artifact was successfully shipped to Germany, where it remained completely hidden from the public eye for 11 years. When the bust was finally unveiled to the international public at the Berlin Museums in 1924, it caused a global sensation. It instantly redefined modern perceptions of ancient history, transforming Nefertiti into an international celebrity and a timeless standard of beauty. Yet, even as millions marveled at her symmetry, early experts remained completely blind to the architectural secrets trapped beneath her painted skin. The early academic consensus viewed the bust as a spontaneous, singular portrait captured directly from life. It took nearly another century for advanced radiological physics to strip away that assumption and expose the hidden political calculus of the artifact. Once the scan results went public, the revelation triggered a modern diplomatic crisis. The Berlin fallout, the geopolitical panic. The revelation of the hidden face transformed a 3,300-year-old artifact into a modern geopolitical battleground. When the scanning data proved that the bust was a complex, multi-layered construction of stone and fragile stucco rather than a solid piece of limestone, German museum authorities immediately weaponized the findings. For decades, Egypt had fiercely demanded the repatriation of Nefertiti, citing the dubious methods used to smuggle her out of the country in 1912. Germany countered by arguing that the subsurface scan data exposed extreme structural vulnerabilities. Moving the bust, they claimed, would subject the delicate, ancient plaster layers to catastrophic vibrations that could cause the Queen's iconic outer face to permanently shear off the limestone core. Egyptologists were terrified not by ancient curses, but by the real-world realization that their most prized global icon was a fragile illusion trapped in a permanent diplomatic exile. Ultimately, the machine did not diminish the Queen, it humanized her. If you want to unearth more hidden history every week, hit that subscribe button right now.